Hey guys, back at it. Today we're going to be doing something a little different from what you would conventionally do with Blender, although I believe you actually could. Unless you were seriously dealing with some hardcore stuff. But that is audio editing. And by hardcore, I mean if you were actually considering the shape of the object and trying to calculate the sound it would make, then maybe we would use Blender. Me, I'm not so worried about that, so we're going to be using Audacity. Audacity is a free to download, free and unrestricted to use program that is absolutely wonderful for editing audio. It is completely compatible with LV2, which is like the new VST in many ways. And I've got it open right here. I'm also going to be using a few sound effects which I have purchased from sounds.com. They're not sponsoring the video or anything, but honestly I really can't recommend them enough. There's an enormous selection. It's something like $10 a month, I'd have to check. And you get so many credits so you can grab whatever you want. You don't have to grab a whole pack or anything like that. I'm also a big fan of Epic Stock Media based out of Tennessee, though once again they didn't do anything to pay for any of this, so truly from the heart there. They do some quality work. Some of their stuff I have no idea how I would actually use, like that warrior princess thing, but hey, maybe it's an inspiration in itself. The last possibility is Foley captures, F-O-L-E-Y if you're ever looking for it. That refers generally to sounds captured and applied to a project like a film after you're done with shooting, but in theory it could be before or contemporarily in a different location. Yeah, so I mean I might find a Foley pack that somebody else put together, or I might do it myself. I have to say, if we're talking about things like, say, crashing glass, that is actually really hard to get a hold of. So everybody's got a cell phone at this point or something. You find like a creaky cabinet that you really like the tone of and feel like you could use. Grab that thing, grab the best recording you can, work with it. Of course, there's no shame in simply purchasing a professional effects pack, which is what I'm doing today. Now, the thing about it is, though, I need this to be relatively seamless. What I mean there is very similar to what I would mean with a seamless tile. I want to be able to layer it so that it will continue without any kind of noticeable crease or pop right into its beginning from its end, or vice versa, which is where Audacity is coming in. Now, I've got a few different sounds here that I picked up. They're all licensed to me. You can currently get them over at sounds.com if you need to. Let's see, I had them in the Creek folder. Give me just a moment here. Gonna highlight all 6 and open. And whoops, hang on, it just opened them all in different editors. My mistake, guys. Give me a second here. I'm actually now a little curious how it is that one uses more than one copy of Audacity at the same time. I'm going to have to look into that. Alright, we're going to do our first play here, and then I'm going to stop briefly just to make sure that I'm properly capturing it with OBS. Alright. Now give me just a moment to check on my recording and ensure that you actually can hear it. Okay, so as you'll notice, these aren't actually all of the same length. That is something we're going to want to correct, and there are a few different ways to do that. Let me think here. Sometimes you'll get lucky and one of them will literally be exactly half of the length of another one, but at the moment we're dealing with 6 sounds. I have no idea if I'm going to use all of them. So let's start with one at a time. I'm going to head down to the bottom one here, the long one, and hit solo and play. I like that one. Let's try this. Yeah, that I'm not sure I have a use for, so I'm going to cut it out, and I can always re-import it later if I need to. That sounds useful. I kind of like the earthy feel of that. I feel like it would be a good thing at the beginning or the end of this. Maybe I'll use that. It's a little quiet, and that's easy to fix with an amplify filter. And yeah, that's too shallow for me. Alright, we're down to 4 of them. So the first thing to consider here is I want you to look at the beginning and the end here, and notice this sort of envelope shape. Now, all synthesizer sounds do have an envelope shape of sorts. It's how we control it. There's the rise, sustain, and fall off of it. We need to undo that if we want to make a tileable sound, though. Okay, guys. Just took a look, made sure I was actually recording everything. I also slightly increased the opacity on my face. I'm a little nervous about that because last time I ended up writing over all the screencast keys. But on the bright side, they were in brilliant pink, so hopefully they were easy enough to see. Alright, I also kind of came up with a conclusion on what I want to do for this house creaking sound, which we will come back to in Blender, and I'm going to attempt to show you a cool trick with drivers. These two, I believe, are my best bet. It gives the sound a sort of texture. They're both stereo. But, you know, I want them to line up in the middle, really. Okay, yeah, so you can just grab this, which is, I believe, called a time shift tool. I was going to say a scrubber, but I believe that actually implies playing back while you're doing it. Not 100% sure. I have been a DJ, but it was a very long time ago, and yeah, that's like selling soaps on Etsy, so it's alright, I enjoyed it. So now we're going to be merging these down. Oh, right. About tiling. The most important thing when you're attempting to tile a sound, and this could arguably be said for images too, is if we zoom all the way in on frequency mode, as opposed to spectrograph, you'll note that you can kind of see the movement of each of the samples. You need to make sure that they are rising up on one end where they are rising on the other, and preferably crossing the same point. The easiest point to do that at is always 0. But it's not the only one. You just need to make sure there's no jump, because if it jumps in amplitude, that's going to sound like a pop or some clearly unorchestrated, unintentional sound. Now, I'm kind of fortunate with these, as they were generated for this kind of work, and they already seem to be accepting that. But if I was working with something like, say, this guy, which is apparently also pretty well done, you would want to match the slope of the wave as closely as you possibly can. Like, I'm not going to be using this after all, so I guess I can do what I will with it. Let me hit solo there. Sometimes it's a good idea to actually separate the two tracks into two different mono tracks instead of stereo too, because you can see that while I would be crossing 0 here, I'd be starting right up in the middle up here. So you would also need to find a point where they both correspond to each other for that, which, you know what, might be right here. It's rising on the left channel and dropping on the right. So I'm going to delete that, and then all the way out here, right, rising on left, dropping on right. I would get rid of that. Whoop. Not quite there, Michael. Rising on left, dropping on right. You know what? I'm going to cut right into the middle there. Then you would just need to worry about frequency tuning. And you can generally do that in two different ways. One is to switch to spectrogram, which gives you a three-dimensional plot. Amplitude is color, frequency is height, and time is, I guess you'd call it progress here. So you can see the different components of the waveforms combining here. And obviously we've got a lot of density, of energy density in the higher frequencies, a little in the very low ones, as you can see right here, and a big gap in the middle. Now, two ways to deal with that are, to begin, are high-pass and low-pass filters. I believe that these might actually be the inspiration for filters in audio and video work, because they're actually very easy to produce if you've just got a few components. But, I mean, we don't really need to produce hardware components anymore. There's no longer any real advantage over digital technology. Now, low-pass filter here is going to give you a target frequency and a roll-off, which is how many decibels it's going to drop per octave away from that cutoff frequency, or something similar to it. And if I do this, let me play it once first. Alright, now if I do this, you can hear it. It's now almost exclusively the low pass. In fact, if I do it again, you should be able to see the progress here. Yeah, you see all that white there? Actually, you know, I may have had the intensity backwards a moment ago. Let me try it one more time. Hey. And of course, the counterpart to it, which is just one wire swap, really, from a low-pass filter, is a high-pass filter. After applying those, you would generally want to apply something like amplification to bring them back up to full volume. The other possibility, and this is a little advanced, but we all end up using it pretty quickly, is an equalizer. Let's see, I know you're in here. Echo, fade in, fade out, filter. Graphic equalizer. Alright. So, suppose I turn this one way up. Okay. Probably not the best possible sound. I'm guessing it's in one of the darker areas. Graphic equalizer. Grab a few of these. How about that? A graphic equalizer gives you fine-grained control over the relative intensities of each band of frequency. And in this case, I mean, there are actually a few of them you can use for Audacity. This is, I believe, the default one. It's not my personal favorite. I like it when you can, say, link them together and get a nice kind of smile drag on it, which I believe I have installed, but you know what? I think it's on the other machine, so... Anyway, from here, though, you can tell what frequency band you're working with by just hovering the mouse over that bar to 5 kilohertz, and you can see where they correspond to by simply looking at your spectrograph. Let's see. 2 kilohertz looks significant. 1 kilohertz. 2 kilohertz. Let me drop that down, see how it sounds. Whew! That was a difference. Hit Control Z there. Alright, but we're not going to be using this one, as I said. We just want these two. Oops, solo. And I want that one unmuted too. Now we're going to grab them. I'm going to go ahead and format, right? Tracks. Alright, under the Tracks menu and under Mix, you will have something called Mix and Render. What that will do is it will combine the two in an intelligent way, attempting to prevent clicks and pops, and render them into a new track. Now, Mix and Render itself does render to a new track, but it replaces the old ones, like so. Here we go. So if I have this on solo, well, it may not be obvious immediately, you can hear that it's the combined two tracks, which are now missing. The other possibilities in here are mixed stereo down to mono, which basically combines both the left and right channel. I'm going to do that to demonstrate it here. I don't think it's what I actually want. They're both mono now, so they only have one channel. And there are such things as tracks that have up to, I've seen as high as 15 channels in the past, but that was with some scientific equipment. It wasn't really designed for the human ear. In fact, you may even be using 7.1 surround sound or 5.1 on your PC. Now, such things do exist, but it's actually very rare to have to render more than 2 at a time. And generally, you just end up stacking them. So let me hit Control-Z one more time. Effect. No, not effect. Mix. Mix and render to new track. Solo. Alright, that's what we're going to be using here. I'm going to export that as an OGG, I think. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and call this Old House Squeak. I apologize if you guys can't see the save window, but it's not really that relevant. It's pretty standard, actually. I don't really care about the metadata. Alright, next up we're going to be taking care of that in Blender, and I'll show you a little bit of the more advanced effects that Blender has in it for rendering audio. Okay, back to it. A few changes I've made since last time. For starters, I've moved the camera from this base collection to the scene collection itself. I may end up doing something like instantiating that collection in geometry nodes or something like that. I don't need to instantiate a camera too. Additionally, I've added a sound to the scene already. Let's just Shift A and speaker. We're going to be going over a lot of the idiosyncrasies and details of using sounds in Blender here. This is not the only way to do it, but it is very handy when you want some sense of spatial orientation from the sound. You could just as easily do it in the video editor as an example, but then I would probably be using Audacity to make sure everything aligns properly. And generally I don't have to, but when possible I prefer to use the same software or the same software suite for orienting sound in a 3D scene. Realistically, I feel like Blender, which is already capable of a lot more than just 3D modeling as it stands, is on the verge of being an excellent digital audio workstation too at this point, as it has all of the general furnishings already present in it. It's got noodle graphs, it's got filter as a general setup, it's got everything in there. But for the moment, I generally use Ardour or Audacity, or sometimes LMMS. I like their MIDI interface when I don't want to actually get on the keyboard behind me. And I'll be honest with you guys, it's been a while since I touched that thing. I'm probably terrible right now, so... Now next up, after you've added it, your sound, which I believe I did. Here we go, speaker. Parent it to the camera. And on top of parenting it to the camera, I want you to go ahead and move your cursor to the camera, and then grab the speaker and put it on top of the cursor. The reason for this is the camera is also your listener. It's not just your eyes, it's your ears. Let me go ahead and turn on screencast keys for you one more time. And this time, hopefully, my face is not in the way. Yeah. Alright. One more trick with cameras is when you're right in front of an object, or you happen to have the viewport camera in just the right spot, but the camera itself isn't there. Given that it's selected, you can hit Control-Alt-0, and it should move the camera directly to the view. Now, one thing I'm not liking here is I appear to be too far away from my object to see it. And we'll likely correct that in just a moment, but let me do a quick render. And let me make sure you guys can see it. You can. Great. Alright, this is a decent place to start. We still need to work on some terrain and maybe a foundation here. I'm thinking maybe really, really old brick. But first, our sounds. Now, I've added a lattice to this previously. Lattices are interesting objects. You can't actually add a new vertex to a lattice in any meaningful way. In fact, you'll notice that Shift-A does nothing. You can't really add anything to this. What it provides is an alternative reference coordinate for vertices with a lattice modifier on them. So they might usually be X, Y, and Z. They will instead conform to the relationships between the vertices of this lattice. And I mean, it's meant for the house. You'll see that I've scaled it to the side of the house, but I'm not actually convinced that that's really necessary. I think it's almost purely for the convenience of the user, which is not to say you shouldn't take advantage of that convenience. Now, here's the kicker. Even though you can't add any vertices to it or fill anything in or something like that, that's not really what a lattice is for. You can apply shape keys. I have two shape keys here. There's the basis, which is the default, and key 1 here, the first one I added, which is a slight twist. Now, this is the means by which I generally animate a lattice after it's been applied. In order to apply it, you simply go into your modifiers, add modifier. Currently, lattice is right here under deform, and select the lattice you want. You likely only have one. I've had some scenes that have had a few in them. If you want to restrain it to a vertex group, you can do that here. And also you can change the strength if you want to dampen it a bit. These are also great things to consider taking advantage of with an animation. Now, once you've done that and established your shape key, which is very easy, this has to be from object mode, not edit mode. As you can see, it locks out. But in object mode, every time you hit plus, it will add an additional shape key, with the first one being the basis. The basis is the original structure. It's not something you want to play with, and I encourage you to have all of your vertices already in the scene, if you can do anything about that, before you start adding shape keys. The interesting thing is shape keys were a method of animation that has actually been around since before armatures, which actually use a system very similar to what the lattice is doing. You can use these with almost any object in Blender, including the meshes. We're just using it on a lattice here for the sake of convenience. And when I toggle the value here, after selecting the shape key that I want, you'll note that it will deform to match that. And you can see how the shape of my house mesh and everything else under it, they all have the lattice modifier. Every window, everything varies with it. Now the great thing about this is you can actually animate that value too. I'm not sure I want to start with the house perfectly stable. I don't think that would be realistic. Let's just add one here. And I'm going to jump over to layout. Let me just make sure you guys can see that too by jumping into OBS real quick. Yeah, great. So I want to go way back to the beginning, into the shape keys, and you will hold your mouse over that particular value, or possibly the key. I think either one will work. Yeah, and hit I. And when you hit I, it will insert a shape key. Interesting, that didn't show up in screencast keys. Alright, no problem, I stated it. Now, over time, we're going to want it to be moving to a different value, which may not be 0 to 1. It often isn't. Sometimes I'll want some modicum between the two extremes, some median point. And for the moment, I'm going to select that initial keyframe and hit Shift D and bring it all the way out to 250. That way we will have a nice fluid animation between the two. Do I really require a seamless animation here? Not really. But there might be a chance that I'll end up making it seamless and having it creak a little longer to save myself time later. So think ahead, as always. Now, I don't think one key is going to be enough because it's only shifting in one direction. I don't really like that, to be honest with you. So let me head in here. I'm going to... Whoops. What did I just do? Window. Okay, that was in object mode, pardon me. Alright, making certain that we have key 2 selected, our new shape key, you can grab the specific vertices that you want to deform, which in this case I think is reasonably only the top ones. There might be a case where I would have it say hovering off the ground or something, but it seems a little extreme at the moment. And then we're going to rotate them a bit and maybe translate them just a little. Alright, let's compare the two. Nope, I rotated it the wrong way. I kind of like that. Not an excessively stable foundation. And now we're going to rock that somewhat here. Shift I. And then somewhere out here, and I prefer not to have these perfectly on top of each other. We'll say go to 133. I will shift it to something else, like that. And then once again, we're going to go to the very end, and we're going to duplicate this guy. Actually, I guess I didn't need to technically move the cursor, but now we'll just watch it in solid mode and just make sure that it's not doing anything that's too funny. Alright, I think I want to add one more key to it. We're not actually done with our animation just yet. I just mentioned I don't really like it when keyframes sit right on top of each other unless they're really supposed to. It's not a natural movement. But first, let's add this last key. There we go. And now I'm going to make that like this at the beginning, and then say over here, since I don't want it to creak too much, I'll do that. Then duplicate this guy. And it's definitely swaying in the wind here. That's a little concerning, but it's probably nothing. Alright, so let's head over to our animation tab. And I'm going to switch this 3D view to my graph editor. Graph editors are actually very much like a dope sheet, which is actually a term from animation, like hand drawing animation, for scheduling different events in the frame lattice. However, it's a bit more advanced as you are interpolating between different values in your scene in 3D, and the graph editor allows you to actually change the slope of those interpolations to just about whatever you want, really. But let's start by grabbing all of our keys here, heading into channel, and we're going to go to extrapolation mode and make cyclic. Now, what was that, right? It's now attempting to fit all the way across, negative infinity to positive, a seamless transition between every final frame and every first frame. So, you can count on, after that, there being a reasonable transition between the two when you loop back to the beginning. You probably didn't even notice any seam there. There shouldn't even be one. But you know what? Because I'm a skeptical person, I'm going to go ahead and look. Alright. Additionally, it repeats them after that, which is what I'm going for here. Now, I've got a few items that are keyed at the very beginning and the very end to have a specific value here. And I do want them to remain continuous. However, I don't like them hitting that inflection point in the animation at the same time. It looks strange. So I'm just going to grab them and move them back or forward just a little bit. And we should still have a seamless animation here, but without anything stacking on top of itself. So unless you're looking at the timeline, you shouldn't be able to notice where exactly the repeat was from. Yeah, you know, I think we've got it here. Now, I began this whole demo talking about sounds, right? In fact, we even already fit our ambient sound speaker to the camera. There are probably other ways to create an ambient sound in Blender, but that's the way I generally do it. Let's see, let me make sure that actually, it looks like we didn't parent it to the camera yet. Alright, well, do that first. Select both of them, select the camera, hit Control P. Parent to. Oh, that's the problem. I did do it. Okay, let me just go ahead and drop that in the scene collection then. Speaker should be a child of camera. Alright then, let me just go ahead and clear parent, since I seem to have it the wrong way around. Maybe that would work, but I do not trust it. It would not work in a normal way. Okay. Let's try parenting it to the lattice instead. And now I can parent it to the camera to the speaker. I'm sorry, the speaker to the camera. Yeah, there we go. Alright, the camera is the thing I'm going to be moving. The speaker is not. So I'm going to go cursor to selected, select speaker, selection to cursor. I don't know that offset really matters here so much. And I may actually end up scaling my house down to a reasonable size at this point too, as it is possible to increase the depth of field of a camera, but I find Blender's default values for it are very reasonable in most cases. And this is something I've been intending to do anyway. To go back to that though, the one thing you really want to be sure of when you're modeling a physical object, artificial or organic, is that all of your proportions are correct. You don't want anything to look massively over or undersized. And as a good rule of thumb, humans are about 2 meters tall. A little short of that most of the time. It would depend, of course, on nationality, on the specific character. It's always great if you can find an actual reference for a real person, but in general I presume 2 meters. Now our speaker doesn't have a sound on it yet. So let me go ahead and correct that. I'm going to hit this little musical note with the little wavy sound lines on it and open a sound here. Let me see, can you see what I'm opening? You cannot see the open window, but there's nothing special about it. I'm going to head into my temp folder here and grab oldhousesqueak.ogvorbis, which is the one I just created. That was a strange sound. There we are. Try turning the pitch way down. Two things you can immediately play with in Blender are the volume and the pitch. Now volume is purple here. It likely isn't for you. That's actually because I've attached a driver to it, which is what I'm going to discuss in a moment. I didn't really finish it though. I like to test these things out before I go ahead and do a full demo on them. But the idea is if I could drive the pitch according to an equation that relates to the strength of the different keyframes for the lattice, I could have it creak high-pitched at the right time, low-pitched at other times. It would be a much more involving animation. No matter how silly it is, you always want to maintain that threshold of disbelief, as it's why people are watching. They know it's not real. They still want to be convinced, or as convinced as they can be. It's the same reason we try and keep consistent color and shape languages in an animation. You put the Mona Lisa next to a finger painting, you've demeaned them both. So... In fact, you can actually notice this here. It isn't always updating in real time, but as my initial keyframe increases, it perfectly mirrors that in volume. Now, I want it to mirror in pitch as well. On top of that, I don't necessarily want it to change volume directly relative to the angle. I want it to be loudest relative to changes in the angle. Now there's some complicated math we could do there to determine the derivative, but it's not always necessary. All we really need to know is what the minimum and maximum points are, which is point, I'm going to say 0.9 and 0.53. So let's head back into that driver. Layout, camera, speaker. To add a driver, you generally just right-click on it and hit Add Driver, which is no longer here, of course, because I've already added one. Otherwise, Edit Driver, and it will take you to a default. Generally, this will automatically be set to a transform channel, I think. Now, try and keep the mouse over it, because if you do move the mouse off of it, it will disappear. And yes, it's small enough and my mouse is sensitive enough that that does make me just a little crazy, but that's alright. So I've got this as my value. We're going to want a scripted expression here. Value is equal to this particular item. Key blocks is the shape keys. You'll want it to be the shape key name dot value. And you can also right-click on things and just select copy path, and it'll give you a rough idea what the path is there. This is one of those areas where Blender very much becomes an IDE. So I'm going to say minus 0.9, since that was my low, divided by, I'm going to say 0.5 here. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. And we'll want the middle of it, which is going to be around 0.25. And this should be the absolute value of it. What that little equation would mean is when it's at 0.9, it's going to be 0. When it's at 0.5, which I believe was the other end of it, something like that, it is going to be 1. Actually, you know what? I am doing this wrong. It's a good thing I said that out loud. And minus 0.5 means I want it to be at its highest right in the middle. Unfortunately, this is a maximum volume of 1/2, and I think we want to go ahead and go with our full volume. So I'm going to multiply that by 2. It'll tell you if you've malformed your expression. That seems about right to me. Now the only remaining problem is we now have 3 keyframes to worry about, not just 1. If I was just using 1, that would be it. We also need to worry about pitch. I want it to creak at a higher pitch in the middle of its swing. There's more energy going into it there. It's moving faster. It makes sense that it would sound a bit higher. So let's head back to our speaker. And we're going to edit our driver one more time after I save this thing, because I shouldn't be too confident. Edit driver. Now we can actually duplicate these pretty readily, because the only real difference between our first keyframe and the others is a single number. Consistency isn't good if it adds to confusion, but oops. Okay, you know what? I'm going to show you guys another trick. Copy as new driver, which is down here beneath the tooltip text, which is being surprisingly inconvenient right now. We'll copy any keyframe as a driver. Then all we have to do is head back to our speaker, edit driver, oh, well that's not convenient at all. I already have a driver. Okay, back to the lattice. Let's go with copy full data path, speaker, edit driver. I mean, come on, I already did it once. Here we go. You can copy paste them. Seems to be looking at the exact key as the object, and I'm going to go ahead and humbly admit I'm not entirely sure how you do that, though I'm very interested. What this basically is it's a directory navigation that will show you how to get to that exact point. I'm going to come back in a bit after I've figured out how it was that I did that in the first place, and I will show you how it was done. There's also a driver's editor. Here we go. Which can be very helpful for finding these things. In fact, I kind of feel like it should be something that we could just pop into a window in here somewhere, like a workspace. But, you know, that's all right. Okay, and we're also going to want these to have different names, because all they're going to do otherwise, knowing Python, is they're going to overwrite the original value. And I haven't used them yet. Why haven't I used them yet? Because I don't know their limits. Let's see, key 2 is our next one. Actually, come to notice it. Okay. Edit driver. Edit driver. This should be value 3 because I looked at the wrong one last time. Alright, no biggie though. So this is going to be between 0.08 and 0.8. I'm going to say between 0.1 and 0.8. So let's head back to our speaker, edit driver. I can see, you can see that little pop up there. There's a reason why, for security, they don't always allow for the execution of code, which is generally something I think we're way too quick about as it stands. Just a few days ago, there was actually an exploit exposed in PDFs where they had something that let them perform arithmetic operations on pixel colors, and somebody figured, oh, well, that means I can make like an image that would work like a virtual CPU. And yeah, long story short, it's now possible with a PDF to totally exploit somebody's system in a very inefficient but certainly effective way. So, yeah, I mean, this is something we generally just need to do. It's likely how they're going to change it in PDFs too. So you need to tell it to allow the execution of the script, especially if you're using drivers. Otherwise, none of them are going to work. If you happen to be using a blend file from someone else who you do not trust, then you most certainly should not allow it. It is in your best interest to prevent this. But for the moment, I just wrote that. I know what it does. Allow execution. And now we just need to look at our other keyframe. We have value 3, we have value 1. What does 2 range between? It's going to be from 0.56 to 0.36. That's convenient. Grabbing our speaker, editing the driver. Plus 2.0 times the absolute value. Value 2 minus 0. I think it was 1. You know what? This doesn't even need to be perfectly accurate. And then lastly, we'll want to wrap all of these around, wrap parentheses around all of them and divide it by 3. And now let's see what we've got. Hopefully this will sound good. That's not right. For starters, I'm going to get rid of these 2.0 factors. And these minus 0.5s. I really wish I could just use the text editor for this. In fact, you guys might not see it, but I'm going to go ahead and grab a text editor now that I've copied it and see if I can make sense of it. Divided by 3, 0.5. 3 minus 0.9 0.5. Yeah, we don't need that divide by 0.5 either. Yeah, we do. What am I talking about? Of course we do. Value. There we have it. Okay, the long story short here is that I have mangled this somehow. So let's just try going with value plus value 2 plus value 3. Okay, that is a start. This is going to be divided by 3.0. Sometimes you need to go back to the beginning to get it to play audio again. And driver. I'm going to minus 1.5 here. That's probably too much, but yes, it is. You can see that it changed a little there, but that's just too quiet. Let's try 0.75. Cut that in half and check it again. This isn't actually a sound I want to be overpowering in the scene. I'm actually hoping to have music playing at the same time, to be honest with you. But copy driver and paste driver. What that basically did is it aligned pitch to be exactly equal to what's happening with volume. I'm not sure what the 0.1 is, likely a lower limit. Okay, and we're going to need to adjust that though. It actually was playing sound there, or attempting to. The problem is it's way too quiet for you to hear it. Let's go to 2 times that value. And let me jump back to the beginning. A little excessive. It's also hitting the end way too fast, so I'm going to go with 1.2 here. It's always tricky working with pitches and volumes because you have to worry about amplitude with those, which is nonlinear. And driver. Let's try 1.6. Very well. 1.3. Can you guys see the driver's editor? No, you can't. It's a whole different window. Wow, that's inconvenient. Okay. I'm not convinced that 1.2 was a problem, but 1.3 is not. So let's try one more thing. Yeah, I must have done something else that was screwy with it. I think we've almost got the kind of feel that I'm looking for here. Now I just need to deal with the intercept. Minus 0.15, I think. Let's see how that sounds. And you know I'm going to do that with volume too, actually, as I think it's just a little too loud for comfort. 0.15. Let's just try that one again. Okay, there you have it. An animated, perfectly renderable house minus a foundation, which I'll come back to. And a brief tour of what's possible with speakers for sound in Blender. They can be very handy. They're also very handy if you want to have a locational sound, like you have, say, glass breaking somewhere to the left, to my left. You would want the actual speaker to be right on top of the mirror or whatever it is that broke for that shattering sound, because your ears should agree with your eyes. One thing I always thought would be kind of cool if I could find a way to implement it is something that would give Blender LV2 and VST2 support as well. I think that would be awesome. But once again, I'd have to have enough time cleared up to really start to understand how... Oh, that's not right. There we go. Sorry, I just noticed something I'd screwed up there. I think it would do wonders for how much we can control sound in Blender. Like if you could even have that equalizer in there. Blender actually uses its own unique windowing system, which is not unheard of, actually. GWT is not the GNU windowing toolkit, it's the GIMP windowing toolkit. GNU just uses it and popularizes it. Ghost, which is Blender's, actually came about when they had a serious problem with pop-ups and the general layout of most art software. And you know, I still have a problem with that. I don't want anything jumping up in my face. I still kind of have that problem with the driver editor in Blender, actually. These workspaces are supposed to be windows in themselves, and they are designed to be as out of your way as possible, which honestly is beautiful. But I'm sure they're working on it. Yeah. So for the moment, though, I just need to work with my catalog of different chunks of software for the sake of producing adequate sounds in here. And you know, that's all right. I think as capable as Blender is, it's very important that they don't bite off too much at once. And they've been pretty good at that so far. I'm a big fan of the Unix philosophy, one software, one responsibility, and total interoperability, so that never becomes a problem. Still need to figure out what that bronzy color is coming from, but I'm sure I can. Alright, so next time I'm probably either going to show you how to add maybe a mist layer to this, which is actually super easy and probably wouldn't take the whole lecture, or I will start showing how to shatter the glass, which is going to happen eventually. Possibly add some terrain around it, which is pretty easy to do with Blender. It's not that much harder than with Unity or Unreal. And what else do we have here? Got to add the foundation, but I'm not so worried about that. Oh, crap. I know what these are. Yeah. They're all spiraling out from that little centerpiece I had for the dome above the door. Alright, well that'll be easy to fix. I just need to duplicate this. I thought I had. And assign a different material to them. Well, that's great. Now I know where that came from. Whew. Problem solved. A number of the scenes I've got in this, such as the hallway, the main room, the bathroom, the kitchen, they're likely to be completely different scenes, because that's just how we do this, unless I'm actually concerned about the final model being used for architecture, in which case I would probably be using a CAD program, not specifically Blender. Blender's all about entertainment. It has different constraints, not necessarily easier constraints, but yeah. As you can see, though, we are on our way. The last thing I'll be doing is, after I've rendered a few scenes, I intend to have something here where we have a camera moving out on a track, very much like an actual track. You can do crazy things in 3D, but they can be super distracting. From a breaking window, and I will be compositing the entire inside the house scene right behind that window. That way I can do a fluid transition of the camera backing up, the glass smashing, probably right as it passes through it, but something else would be too, and then just zooming out, and then I'll have my logo and title. Okay, that ought to do it, guys. I'll go ahead and try and put this together into a coherent rendering, and I will see you next time.